Hello and welcome to this episode of KPMG's Singapore Budget Insights. I'm your host, Priscilla. In 2025, businesses in Singapore will continue to face a volatile and increasingly complex business landscape. What will the country need to prioritize to enhance its global competitiveness, and how should Singapore navigate key focus areas like ESG and digital transformation? Here with me to discuss this are Ajay Kumar Sanganeria, Partner, Head of Tax, as well as Addy, our tax partner focusing on energy and natural resources, telecommunications, media and technology. Ajay and Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Likewise.
Ajay, let's start off with a brief overview of the business landscape today. Could you give us a quick overview of some of the key challenges that you see businesses face as they step into 2025?
As we step into 2025, challenges for businesses continue to increase at the back of four key trends. First one is increase in tariffs. As large countries start to look more inwards and adopt more trade protectionism approach through higher tariffs, other countries may follow a similar approach. This may result in Singapore companies finding it difficult to access global markets freely. Secondly, rising geopolitical tensions. These tensions can divide the world further, leading to disruptions to international and trade partnerships and create uncertainty for companies. Thirdly, climate change and related regulations are causing major shifts in global supply chains, which will affect global supply and demand patterns. Last but certainly the most impactful is the pace of technological change, and particularly AI, which will require companies to innovate rapidly and upskill their talent to stay competitive. The key to tackle these challenges is to be ready and stay ahead of the curve. Given this context, our budget proposal this year focuses on how Singapore can support companies and individuals to maintain its competitiveness in three critical areas.
Thanks, Ajay. That sounds interesting. The KPMG budget proposal this year focuses on the three R's: ready, refreshed, and resilient. Could you give us a brief overview of what the three R's are, and what are some of the key recommendations that we have outlined under each of the R?
Sure, Priscilla. The first chapter, Ready, focuses on how Singapore can lead with sustainable impact. In order for businesses to be more sustainable, support will need to be put in place to ensure that operating environment is ready for them to progress on their sustainability journey as smoothly as possible. Some of our recommendations touch on providing assistance to companies to manage sustainability reporting requirements and scale up blended finance through various tax schemes and grants. It is also important to ensure this transition is inclusive, which means support for both large and smaller companies. The second chapter, Refreshed, which is focused on talent, talks about how the local workforce needs to be future ready and better leadership skills to navigate companies in the increasing complex environment, as I mentioned earlier. We have also proposed suggestions on how Singapore can build stronger talent pipeline in emerging areas like ESG and AI. The third chapter, Resilient, talks about how Singapore will need to take steps to drive innovation and retain its status as one of the world's most digitally advanced economies. Our recommendations are centered around ensuring that Singapore has the right ecosystem to create such creativity, whether it is through grants or other forms of support. They also touch on how businesses can be well supported when they venture to overseas markets.
Thanks, Ajay. Mark, now I'd like to turn it over to you to focus on sustainability. In our proposal, we talked about the importance for Singapore to drive a sustainable impact for the region. Could you share more about how you see Singapore doing this?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to acknowledge, Priscilla, is that Singapore has done very well so far to establish itself as a leader in the area of sustainability. Now, we all know how quickly things develop in this area, and it's really important that Singapore continues to have the right policies and the right frameworks in place to maintain its status as a leader. We have three core recommendations in our budget proposal for this year in relation to sustainability. The first is to develop a centralized ESG reporting hub. Now, this will provide companies, and especially those with cost or resource constraints, with assistance and guidance when it comes to interpreting what can be very complex ESG regulations. Secondly, we'd like to see the creation of a decarbonisation assistance facility. Now, what do I mean by that? This is a facility that will provide financial support to hard-to-abate industries, so things like maritime, aviation, heavy industry, all of which are key pillars of Singapore's economy. This will offer long-term financing in the form of things like grants and attractively priced loans to enable those companies to more quickly implement clean energy measures across their value chains. And lastly, we'd like to see a tax deduction scheme established, similar to what we see with the Productivity and Innovation Credit Scheme from a few years ago, which relates to qualifying investments in sustainability. And this will encourage companies, and especially those really important SMEs, to participate in the energy transition without worrying about losing their competitive edge.
Thanks, Mark. Singapore is one of the world's most technologically advanced nations. However, the ability to drive technology use differs, with our SMEs particularly disadvantaged in this area. Mark, how important do you think it is for our Budget 2025 to focus on SMEs in this area? And in what way do you think this will help them better prepare for the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually read recently that 99% of businesses in Singapore are SMEs. So that tells you the importance of SMEs to Singapore's economy. And we really can't afford to leave them behind as we're advancing towards an AI future. But when we look at the disparity in deployment of AI between large companies and SMEs, it is quite significant. And it really reveals inadequate access to capital, inadequate access to talent, and also implementation know-how among SMEs. So what we would like to see as part of Budget 2025 is a narrowing of the AI gap between large companies and SMEs by encouraging the adoption of things like technology enablers, which gives SMEs the foundational resources required to implement AI without incurring significant capital spending. We'd also like to see targeted grants for AI-related investments, specifically for those SMEs that maybe don't have the funding available to invest in these kind of things. We'd also then like to see more funding for programs which are looking at upskilling AI skills in workforces across all different levels. And that will benefit both the individuals and the companies that they work for.
Thank you, Mark. Ajay, now I'll turn it back to you for the last question. Earlier on, you highlighted the need for the Singapore workforce to be upskilled to meet the demands of the future. This requires a fresh approach from business leaders to advance the nation's talent strategies. Management themselves also need to be equipped with the right people and skill sets to build long-term value for their firms. How do we ensure that businesses have the right kind of leadership to drive all of this?
Companies understand that strong leadership will be necessary to navigate through a more volatile and challenging business environment, and they need to groom such leaders. To do so, companies are individually identifying required competencies and managing their own talent pipeline. To support them and ensure more consistency in the process, we are suggesting a government-backed National Competency Index, which companies can refer to as benchmark and build leadership talent in a consistent and coordinated manner. The second aspect would be stronger governance, and the board plays a very important role here. We are suggesting that the government provides support for development and accreditation of board members, as well as for younger leaders to do board apprenticeships to be better prepared for tomorrow and provide stronger governance oversight to companies.
Thank you, Ajay, and thank you, Mark. As you both have highlighted from the budget proposal, Singapore must take the lead to further cement its positions in the three key areas of sustainability, human capital, and digital readiness. This is how Singapore can maintain its competitiveness, deliver significant benefits for its people, and drive long-term success. We have come to the last episode of our Singapore Budget 2025 series by KPMG in Singapore. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you in the next one.